Hello. Okay, you should see the desktop and you should hear me. And I think everything seems okay. Can you hear me? Is it fine? Does everything seem okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. I think I need to turn. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, first, let me point out that I put the thing. You have a homework assignment that was due on Tuesday, and one thing that if you look, one thing that's a little bit tricky is you submit your homework in Brightspace, and you'll see your grade for the homework assignment on Brightspace. Until the homework assignment is graded, Brightspace shows you a grade of 0, which I think is kind of silly on their part. It should show a blank, but it shows 0, and that's not your grade. That just means that that's what Brightspace puts in place of a grade until the assignment has been graded. I won't grade the assignment until this weekend. So you over the weekend at some point you should see a grade show up there. Okay, so if you look in Brightspace, unless you happen to get a 0 for the homework assignment, which isn't likely, you'll see that number change. But one of the odd things is if your grade is a 0, like if you don't turn it in, then it stays 0. Okay. But if you see it 0 right now, it's just because it hasn't been graded yet. Okay. So that was your first homework assignment. And I put a message here that says that there's your second homework assignment. It's actually not there yet. Okay. So I was writing it last night, but I didn't have time to finish it. So it's not really up there yet. So if you click on that link right now, if you click on this link and you click on this one, you'll just get this message saying that there's not found. That's because the homework assignment hasn't been put up there yet. Okay. And it'll be up there tonight or tomorrow. Okay. And then there's a reading assignment. We're going to start talking about a real important chapter next week, chapter 4 of the book. So this is a this is a chapter that introduces an idea that we're going to be using for the whole rest of the semester all the time, something called methods. Okay. So that's a real important chapter. Okay. So we'll start talking about that next week. And then in the chapter we've done, today we're going to finish talking about this chapter 3 and this chapter 1 in the other book, especially the other book, the book that looks like this. It has a lot more exercises built into the book that you can work on. And in particular, I give you 2 pages of homework problems from that second book. Okay, so if you click on this link, there are what are called mixed up code practice problems. Okay, and I want you to do a lot of these problems. These are good exercises in practicing Java. What it is they describe what a program should do here. Then they give you 4 lines of code, but the lines of code aren't in the right order. And you have to drag them over to here and put them in the right order. Okay. Okay. Now, use the following program statement should print Marie's first name on one line and her last name on the next line. Put the blocks that have been mixed up. Okay. So you have someone whose name is Marie. Now, the first thing, if you look at these things, you can't print the name and then say what the name is. That would be the wrong order. So have you should say what the first name and last name are before you print them. Okay. And then you want to print the last name. But now notice that this line here prints the first name again. It's not needed. Okay. So the following program says should print Marie's first name on one line, her last name on the next line. Okay. So right now we have first name is Maria, last name is Hernandez. Then system out print line first name, system out print line last name. So now we can check. Okay, perfect. See, tells us that we have the right answer. So they want you to think about code. The problem started out something like this. Lines of code that were in that order, but that order doesn't make sense, and they want you to make sense of it over here, and then you can check when you have it right. And if you make a mistake, for example, suppose I had the uh, yeah, suppose I printed out 2 first names. So I didn't really read the code real carefully. And I check. Well, oh, it isn't perfect. This one they this one they messed up. It isn't perfect. Notice that I have first name, first name. Okay. Let me do something really wrong. Oh, this must be a test problem. It doesn't even really seem to check what you did. Oh, let me check. No, see here. Oh, that's because I had solved the problem before resetting it. So it thought I had, yeah, you have to click reset to start over again. Okay. So for example, if I put the names and then I print first name and I don't really read and I print first name again and I check, see, it tells me where I made a mistake. See, this block isn't right. So reset, try again. Okay. Print out the first name. Oh, but then I need the variables before I can print them. Okay, check. Okay, your program's too short. Add more blocks. So I'll add that block. Check. Perfect. Okay. So then here's another example. The following program segment should print the words in a famous poem. Okay, but the blocks have been mixed up. So put them in the right order. Okay, so you look at what the output is and you see, well, it's supposed to be, oh, well, roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. Now notice see they were in order 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's 4, 3, 2, 1. Check and perfect. Okay. If I goof it up, notice it said perfect because I didn't reset it. Okay. So something you have to you should, if you did it wrong, you should reset it and start over again. Okay. So if you do something wrong and check, it'll tell you in this case there's not enough, you didn't use all the lines. Okay. These are really good practice problems. They make you think about how the code on the left should be put together to solve some simple problem. Okay, and these are really these kind of problems can only be done in a web page. So this is one of the innovative ideas in this book. They came up with these kinds of problems. It turns out that these problems are very helpful. They usually do a lot to help you understand how programming works because you get to play with the code. You don't have to type it yourself. You just think about what order it should be. So there's a bunch of these on this page, and you should practice doing those. They get a little bit harder as you go down. Okay. All right. So that's do these mixed up code practice problems. Okay. Then there's another page where the problems are a little bit harder. They're not mixed up code. They actually want you to write the code yourself. Here they had update the main method to calculate and print the perimeter of a rectangle having width 7 and height 8. Okay. So so that's actually kind of a lot to think about. You want to calculate the perimeter of a rectangle that has width 8 and height 9. So that's practice with using variables. So there needs to be a variable int width, which is 7. There needs to be a variable int. Now, this actually I could make this either a double or an int. Remember, there's two kinds of numbers in Java. I'll just stick with, since they wrote it as 7 and 9, I'll just stick with int. And height equals 9. Okay. And I need to calculate and print the perimeter. Okay. So that means I need something that holds the perimeter. Okay. The perimeter of a rectangle is, in this case, 2 times the width plus 2 times the height. Okay, because a rectangle has 4 sides. There's 2 width sides and 2 height sides. So 2 times the width plus 2 times the height, and I need a semicolon. Okay, and they want us to print it. So should do something like system dot out dot print line perimeter. Okay, and run it. Okay. Now notice that down here, when you click run, it tells you whether you failed or passed some tests. Okay. Okay. Now I failed because I didn't really finish the problem. You notice it said that rectangle should have width 7 and height 9. I should have two outputs, a 32, which is the perimeter, and an area, and I only had one output. So I need to finish the problems. I need to have add another statement to calculate and print the area. Okay, so I need int area equals, well, area is width times height. Okay, then I need to print it out. Okay, okay, now let me see if I got the right answer. So now I run it and I pass their test. I should have output 63 and 32 and 63, and that's what I got out. Okay, now these are harder problems than the other ones because you have to write all the code. You have to read this and use ideas that were in this chapter. In this case, the ideas are variables and operations. You need a variable for width, a variable for height, a variable for perimeter, but you compute the perimeter using the width and height. Okay. Now, if I cheated, here's an example how I could cheat. I know that the answer perimeter is 32, and I know that the height is 63. So what if I just didn't do any calculation? What if I just printed out the answers? If I run this, I'll fail because they were checking that I did some addition. They'll see that there's nothing in my program that did any addition. I just printed out a couple numbers. So that they're checking your code. They're doing something on their website to actually look inside your code to make sure that you're doing what you're asked to. They check what your output is. This thing printed out 32 and 63, so it passed that test, but it didn't have a plus sign anywhere in it. Now I don't know why it passed the multiplication. I think that's because we did have a multiplication in there earlier. Okay, so we passed that coding the check contains multiplication. It doesn't anymore, but it did a little while ago. Okay, if I copy this and reload the page, now I'm kind of like starting from scratch. So I was on the second assignment. And I run this. Am I doing the right one? Oh, I was supposed to do this one here. I'm sorry. I was doing the first one. Oh, it still thinks it's doing a multiplication. Not sure why they think it's doing a multiplication, but there is no addition in there. Okay. Maybe again, it maybe just remember that we did type one a little while ago. Okay. So these are a little bit harder problems. Now on the web page, I say to do 11, 12, and 15 because there's a lot on that page. So I don't want you to do all of them. I mean, if you want, you could try to do as many as you can. But since there's so many on the mixed up code, there are easier to do. You should do quite a few of those. These other ones are harder. So it would be good for you to just do a couple of them. So like this one is activity 1. They didn't put the number at the top. They should have put the number at the top. So this one is activity 1. Here's activity oh, they have the numbers wrong. Okay, there's number 8, number 9, number 10, number 11. So I ask you to do 11, 12, and 15. Okay, so there's number 11. That's this box here. This is number 12. That's this box here. And then number 15, or what was the other one? 11, 12. Well, I have a misprint. Probably 14. There is no 15 on the page anymore. Okay, so 11, 12. I mean, yeah, they must have renumbered them because now there's only 14 on the page. Okay, but do 11, 12, and 14. Okay, so these are practice problems. These are not homework assignments. Okay, the assignments that are on this page are the ones you're going to get graded on. Okay, the assignments that I put on this page, when I say something like here, like do these practice problems, that's for you to practice at home. You can still ask questions about them. If you look at one of these problems and you can't figure out how to do it, if you have a little bit of trouble understanding this, come to office hours or send me an email. We can meet with in Zoom, and we could work on these together, like by sharing a screen. You could share your screen and we could talk about a problem. So if you find one of these problems hard to do, or you're not sure how to go about doing it, you should definitely try them. You should definitely work on these. And if you have questions, send an email or ask for, come to office hours. Like there'll be an office hour later this afternoon, or ask to meet in Zoom at some point. Okay, so there will be another homework assignment. There's a reading assignment for what we'll talk about next week, and then these are practice problems on what we have been talking about. Okay, so this is practice problems. Essentially, it's the practice problems for chapter 1 of this other. Uh, it's the practice problems from chapter 1 of this book here. This is one of the two books. So these are practice problems at the end of this chapter here. So the problems are on this page here and this page here. So that's it. It's the end of that chapter. So when you're working on those problems, like if you're on this this coding practice, and you're wondering like what you're supposed to be using, in this book you can say, well, these are from chapter 1. See, this is a list of the chapters. Well, this is the list of the sections in this chapter. And you can, if you need to refresh your memory about an idea, there's variables and data types, expressions and assignment. This is what we've been talking about in class as we've been going on. We've been talking about the ideas from these sections. So this is what these problems are testing you on. These problems are practicing you on what's in this chapter here. Okay. So you can navigate this book. It takes a little bit of practice. It's not a physical book, it's an online book. So you need to get a sense of how to navigate it. Like I link you here to a page in the book. Okay. So like you click on there, okay, you're at a page in the book. And where are you? Well, you're in this chapter. You actually are now in this section 1.9. 1.9, that's this one here. Okay. This would take you back to the table of contents of the book. So there's the table of contents of the whole book. Okay. All right. So again, do these practice problems, and if you have questions about them, please ask. Okay. Because programming is something that's like taking a math class. You have to keep practicing. There's going to be lots of these kinds of little exercises at the end of each chapter, because it's a lot like taking a math class. You need to practice what you're learning about. In a math class, you don't learn anything if you don't practice exactly what you've been talking about. And the same thing with programming. Every time we talk about something, it's important to practice with it. So this book here, this one has a lot of practice problems in it. The other book doesn't have as many. The other book has much fewer practice problems built into the book. The good thing about this book is it has lots of practice problems built into it. Okay, so it's important to do the practice problems as we're reading along. Okay, now what we want to do today is this chapter 3. Okay, now actually, here's what we talked about in class yesterday, or on Tuesday. So let me open that up. We were talking about this idea of variables and doing operations. Okay, and remember, you have two kinds of numbers in Java: integer numbers and doubles. Integer numbers don't have a decimal place, doubles have a decimal place. Okay, and remember, 6.0 is really a double because it's got a decimal place in it. So in Java, 6 and 6.0 are slightly different things. One is an int and one is a double. So 6 and 6.0 are slightly different. Okay. And programs, you before you can get before you can give a variable a value, you have to have declared it. Okay. So for example, if I delete that, this program won't work anymore. Error, cannot find symbol, variable X. See, I tried to give X, I tried to say to Java, remember that X is 5. But Java says, you've never told me about X. You've never declared X. So you can do that on there. There you can declare X. From now on, program can use X anywhere it wants. So it can use X down here. It could give a different number to X. Now it's changing X to be 7. You don't, oh, and it's a mistake to redeclare a variable. Like if I redeclare it, I get another error. Variable X is already defined. And see, the error was at line 18. So you don't declare a variable more than one time. You declare it just one time. Okay, so that int shouldn't be there. There's a lot of rules in programming, and the rules may seem kind of silly. They might seem to be something that gets in the way. Not all languages have the same rules. Like in some languages, it's okay to do that. That will work in some languages. You don't in Python and in JavaScript, those are two famous languages that are used right now. You don't need to declare a variable before you use it. So in the Python language and in the JavaScript language, you can just do that. X is 5, Y is 3.7. That would be okay in those languages, but it won't work in Java. Okay. So in Java, you have to follow the Java rules. And eventually you'll learn like why Java has these rules here. They actually play an important part. So the fact that Python doesn't make you do that actually causes problems in the long run. It makes Python easier to learn, but it makes Python harder to write programs in the long run. It's actually not a good idea of Python to say, oh, you can just use it, you can just uh, put a number in a variable without declaring it. Turns out to actually be a little bit of a mistake. Okay. So there's reasons for these rules, and they show up as you learn more and more about programming. You start to find out why these rules are there. But in the beginning, the rules make it harder to learn because you have to obey every single rule to make your program work. Okay, so we have variables, and we can put what we call a value in the variable. And if we visualize this, the visualizer shows us how the program, when it's running, keeps track of the variables. Like it keeps track of the fact that X holds 5. And then it keeps track of the fact that Y holds 3.7. Then it keeps track, the visualizer is showing us a visualization of the variables in our program. So now we're at line 9. We've declared X and Y and Z, so they're over here. Now there's this line of code that says take the value of X, take the value of Y, and take the value of Z, add them together, so that'll get these numbers here, and put them in a new variable, A. Okay, so there's A, that's the sum of all those. So programs, when you're running a program, it builds a table of these variables, and this is actually happening inside the computer's memory. The visualizer, it's visualizing what's happening inside of the computer's memory when the computer steps through your program. Okay, so the now I'm at line 10. Notice that this thing here points out that I'm at line 10 so far. I'm at line 10 in this thing called main. So I'm in main. I'm in main. I'm at line 10. I'm at line 10. And line 10 creates another variable that holds the word hello. And then line 11 creates another variable that holds the word there. Okay? And then I can print out. Notice that now I did something that showed up over here. I printed something. The output that the program prints shows up in this box down here. Okay. In Dr. Java, it also shows up in a box below the code. Okay. Dr. Java doesn't show you the variables when your program's running. So if I put this program in Dr. Java, I can run it, and the output will appear at the bottom, just like here. The output pits at the bottom. but Dr. Java doesn't let me go back forwards and backwards through my program. Notice if I go backwards, it undoes these things. Now I'm back at line 9. So now I only have variables X, Y, and Z, and I'm about to do variable A. So I can go back, forward, forward. Okay. So that line 13 outputted that line. Line 15 created another variable, and then line 16 prints out that variable. Notice that so line 15 created a variable of this. See, I printed it, or I could create a variable out of it. Instead of printing S1 plus underscore plus S2, I could create a variable that holds S1 plus underscore plus S2 and then print it. Okay. And then I can go through, I can just change these variables. So here I had X is 5 and Y is 3.7. And here I'm going to start changing them. And you watch them change over here. X is going to change. Okay. So X changed from 5 to 7. And then Y is going to change from 3.7 to 4.3. So you can go back and forth. Okay. All right. So that's now the Java visualizer is very much like these boxes that are in these books. Both these books have boxes where you could write program. Okay. And these things are very similar to what the Java visualizer. The Java visualizer does a little bit more than what's in the textbooks. Okay. So we'll quite often do examples in the Java visualizer. Sometimes we'll do examples in the textbook itself. Okay. So we'll go back and forth between working in the textbook and working in the Java visualizer. Okay. Now, here's what we want to talk about next. This variable, we gave these variables values, but the value is just built into the program. Okay. Programs can't always get their values built into them because every time you run the program, it's going to have the exact same values in it. You want programs to get their data from someplace outside of the program. So a real important thing is that a program should be able to get data from outside of the program so that every time you run the program, you could feed it different data. Okay, so that's what we're going to start talking about now. That is this chapter on input. Well, that's this chapter on input. Now, we've actually been doing output. When your program does system.out.println, your program is producing output. This is producing output. We're printing. The output appears in a box that's separate from where our program's running. Okay, we get output from here. But now we want programs to get input. We want our variables to get their value from somewhere that's not in our code. Okay. Okay. So how do we do that? Okay. Now here they remember they say input and output. So the first thing they talk about here is the output. That's the system class. See, we're using this system.out. Okay. And we're using something called a method. This method called println is the thing that actually prints in the output. Okay. So let me just shorten this. Let me just actually create a new Java visualizer page. Okay. System.out.println prints whatever you ask it to. So if I ask it to print 112, it'll print 112. Oh, it slowed down. Let me copy that, and I'm going to reload the page. Yeah, see, something went wrong. So I'm going to reload the page. Try again. There. See, this time it worked fast, better. Now if I go forward, see, I printed 112. Okay, that printed that number. Okay, now if I say something like print hello, before I had a number in there. Well, actually, let me just do them both. I can print a number, or I can print a string. Okay. Print 12, print hello. Okay. I can combine things. So I can say, something like, this is a string, my number is, and then I add on to that string a number. I can mix up. I can see this one printed just a number, this one printed a string. What this one's going to do is it's going to tack that number onto the end of that string. And notice I didn't do it very well. It actually literally tacked that number at the very end of that string, and it ran it on. What means I should have put a space there. I should have put an extra space there to make it look better. Okay, so I'm doing output. Okay, I'm using this method is actually the one that's doing the output. And Java has that method in something called the system.out class. Okay, so in the book, this is the system class. Okay, the method is in the system class. Okay, the print line method is in this system class. And the print line method is the thing in Java that actually knows how to print these things out. And it knows how to combine, for example, it knows how to take this and combine it with that number to get this output here. Okay. And I can also, if I want, I could use a variable, int num equals 45. And then here I could say my number is, I could use the variable name. That variable name will get looked up. Okay, there's the variable holding the number. And now when I print out my number is plus num, see, that gets looked up over here. Okay, now that number is built into the program. Every time I run this program, I'm going to get the exact same number. Okay. What if I wanted that number to come from outside the program? That's the next topic. How do we get the number to come from outside the program? How does the program get input? Okay. And that's also the system class, but a different part of the system class and something called the scanner class. So what we have to do is, here's an example code. We're going to use two classes now, the system class, but we're also going to use the scanner class, but we have to tell Java that we want to use the scanner class. So now our program begins with a line import java.util.scanner. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to put it in my visualizer. I'm going to work both over here and over here. Okay. So over here in the visualizer, I'm going to tell the visualizer that I want to use the scanner class. Okay. Okay, so I'm telling the visualizer that I'm going to use scanner. I don't have to tell it I'm going to use system, because system's essentially built into Java. Scanner is too, but the way Java works is when you want to use scanner, you have to tell Java, you have to do what's called import it. Okay, all right. Now, scanner is something that's going to read from what someone from outside. It reads from outside of the program. Okay. Now, what way it's going to work is you need to type a special line here. Okay, let me actually change this. After you type this line, you have to type this line. What this does is it creates, we're going to talk about this a lot more, it creates a scanner object. It creates something that is a scanner. Okay, so for now, we can essentially, it's creating something called, see this thing system.out, we want to create something called in. Okay, so we create something called in, and we do it new scanner system.in. System.in is the complement of system.out, but you can't use system.in directly. You can use system.out by calling print line on it, but you can't use system.in, so you have to essentially what we say wrap it in a scanner. So we have to create this weird line here. Okay, then we can do in dot next line. Okay, that reads from outside the program. Okay, now let's run this. Notice it said system.print, type something. This blinking cursor is this program waiting for you to type something. This is where the outside world comes in. So I can type hello, I hit enter, and then see this thing type something was printed by line 9. Then line 10 said, I'm going to create a variable called line that gets what's typed at the input. That happened when I hit enter over here. Then it prints out, you said hello, because that's what I typed in. Now I'm at this, see, I have a blinking cursor over here. Line 13 said, type something else. Well, that was this, type something else. Then it's waiting for another line of input. Okay, so I'm over here, I can type, and then I hit, notice what's happening right now is this code is stuck at line 14. It's waiting for me to type something. And it isn't until I hit enter that the typed thing goes over to this program here. So the input is coming, the input's coming from outside the program. It's coming from over here. My program is getting input from what I type over in this box here. And right now my program is at line 14. My program has done all of the lines up to 14, and it's waiting for me to type something in. It's going to store what I type in the variable line, and then it's going to print out what I typed in. Okay, so now I go over here and I hit enter. You also said cats and dogs. Now my program, there's no more blinking. Now my program is done. Okay, if I want to, I can run it again. And I can type something different now. See, now see my program printed out something different because I gave it a different thing. I can type something else. I can type a number. Okay, and I can run my program again. And every time I run my program, I could type something different. Type some junk. Type more silliness. Okay. So my program got input from what I was typing at my keyboard. Every time I run it, okay, type something. So it's reading from me typing at the keyboard. So I get to type something. I typed a bunch of zeros, okay, and then type something else. Okay, so the input was coming from my keyboard. So my program got things from the outside world. It got input. Now see, notice that output I get for automatically. I can just say print to system.output. Input's trickier. Okay, so you have to do a bunch of little steps. You have to import the scanner. Then you have to create a new scanner using system.in. You can't use system.in directly. You have to build a scanner around it. Then I call that thing in. Okay. Then notice how I print to system.out. Well, I use next line, okay, next line on this scanner in, okay, and it reads what I type. Okay, so it reads everything I type over here, and then it reads that and puts it in a variable. Okay. Now, there's more examples down here, but I'm going to start playing around with this one and show you that there's a couple other things you can do with the scanner. Okay. I'm going to change this one to type an integer number. Okay. Now I wanted to read my integer number. Okay. I can go over here and say type in next int. Okay. Okay. Then I can do, oh, I'm sorry, but then I have to say, now this thing is not going to read a string, it's going to read an int. And I'm going to do over here, I'm going to say int number. Okay. Then I'm going to add 1 to that number. Then I'm going to say your number plus 1 equals num. Okay, what I want is I want the program to read a number instead of just reading a string. Instead of reading a string, I want it to actually read in a number. And I want to be able to do arithmetic on that number. Oh, and I need a semicolon there. Okay, now let me run this. Oh, what did I miss up? Oh, okay. Line 16. Let's go to line 16. See if, okay, my mistake is over here on line 16. Okay. Expected, okay, error. Some parentheses expected. Well, there's a parentheses. Does anybody see my mistake yet? There's the parentheses. Okay. Does anybody see my mistake? You're going to be doing this yourself. You know, it's so easy to type things wrong. So the thing is, every time you do something wrong, you have to figure out where the mistake is. So you have to practice staring at the code and going, where's the little mistake? Does anybody see where it is yet? Anybody? I'm printing something. I want that message. Your number plus 1 is, then I want the number.
Is it a syntax error?
Yeah, but what is the error?
Would you need a plus sign before
Yeah.
the num?
Yes, you have, see up here, you have to add those two outputs together, but that's the concatenation add. Remember, this is the addition add. Here I need to say, well, if I want that number to appear after this string, I have to say add it on, concatenate it on. Okay, so that the lack of that little plus is the error, and it completely stops the program from running. Okay, now let's click run. Okay, type something. Now type an integer number. Your number plus 1 is 34. Okay, so I read an integer. Now watch if I run. Now let me run this again. Type an integer. What if I'm kind of dumb and I type, is that an integer? Is that an integer?
No, right?
It's not. It's a word for an integer. You know, same with 2. That's a word for an integer, but it isn't an integer. Okay, but I'm supposed to type in an integer. Oh, look, my program actually crashed because it was supposed to read an int, and what I typed was something not an int, and it makes the program crash. Okay, input mismatch. Okay, see, I got an input mismatch. Now we're going to start, when you start interacting, when your programs start interacting with the outside world, things can go wrong. You ask somebody to type an integer and they don't pay attention and they type something that's not an integer. And that made my program crash. So my program really meant, when it said type an integer and I said next int, it really has to be an integer. Okay, let me run that again. Okay, type something. Well, I don't care what I type here. Type in an integer, okay? 56, okay? Your number was, see, notice every time I run the program, though, I can give it a different integer. Scanner can read a string. It can read an int. Now, here I can also read a decimal number. Type in a decimal number. And I can do, now decimal numbers are called double. Okay, now I want to read in a double, so this should be double. Okay, then I can add 1 to it and I can print out your number as num. Now I'm letting somebody type in a decimal number. Okay, so let me run this. I'm still asking for the first string. Don't care about that. Now type a decimal number, 3.5. Your number is number plus 1 is 4.5. Okay, so I could ask for an int or a double. Now let me go back to, let me change this one to, let me ask this one to be an integer. Type an integer. And then I'll make this one int num1. And I'll ask for next int. And I'll make this one num2. Num2 is going to be a double. So I'm going to ask for first an int and then a double. So the int is num1, and your number plus 1 is num1. Okay. So type an integer. Next int reads an integer. Next double reads a double. So you can ask the scanner to scan in an int, or you can ask the scanner to scan in a double. Okay. Now, did I do everything right? Let's just check. Let's try running it. If I type a double when it's asking for an integer, that's another thing that blows up the program. See, it blew it up. I didn't even get the second prompt. Okay. If you type a string where it asks for an integer, that blows up the program. Okay. When it says, when you call next int, you really have to type an int. Okay. So type in an integer, 7. Oops. Type in an integer, 7. Okay. 7 plus 1 is 8. Now type in a decimal. Now, here's an interesting thing. What if I type 9? Is 9 a decimal number?
No.
No, it's not. But in this case, it will accept 9 as a decimal number. It treated it as 9.0, and 1 plus 9.0 is 10.0. So 9, Java's kind of inconsistent about this. 9 and 9.0 are not the same thing. You can never use 9.0 where it wants 9, but you can use 9 where it wants 9.0. Okay? Notice that here, see how here I used 1? I added 1 to a double. I was really adding 1.0 there, but where you can use an int in place of a double, but you can't use a double in place of an int. So I can use this int in place of a double, but I cannot put a double there in place of an int. Now, if I click run, oh, I got an error. Okay. See, possible incompatible types. Okay, incompatible types. You're adding a double to an integer. Okay, so you cannot use a double where you should be using an integer, but you can use an integer where you should be using a double. That's okay. It's okay to use an integer where you should be using a double. So if I was really typing this correctly, that would be 1, and this would be 1.0, but I'm allowed to just type 1 here in place of the 1.0. Okay. Now, Scanner can let you ask for, oh, and I messed up. I typed something wrong here. Okay. Scanner can let you ask for an integer, and it can let you ask for a double. And let's do one more of these little blocks. Okay. I'm going to say type a word. Okay. Type a word. Now, what do I mean? Now, notice here I said type an integer, type a decimal. Here it just says type a word, any word you want. If you want to read a word, you say string, I'll say word equals in dot next. Okay. Next just gets the next word. Okay. So next int reads an integer. Next double reads a double. Next reads a word. Okay, and then I'll print it out. Your word is plus word. See, did I type everything right yet? Oh, I forgot the closing there. And I need a semicolon there. Okay, so now I can ask for an int, I can ask for a double, and I can ask for a word. Okay, so let me run this. Oh, now what I do? Oh, I misspelled print. Where was that? Line 19, PR. Okay, run it again. Okay. Type an integer, 5. Type a decimal, 6.7. Now it says type a word. I'm going to type 2 words. I typed 2 words. Notice that read only one of them. Yeah, because that's now there's 4 things that you can do with a scanner. You can ask for an int, you can ask for a double, you can ask for a word, and the last one is you can ask for a whole line. Now that one looks like this. That's what it was at the beginning. When we started, it was, I'll say, type a line of text. Okay, type a line of text. Your text is, now that would be next line. That reads everything the person types in. Okay, read one integer, read one double, read one word, read the whole line of what they type. Okay, so let me run this. An integer. Now the integer can be a very long integer. Okay, decimal can have a lot of digits. Okay, word. Okay, type a line of text. Oh, let's see. I misspelled text there. Now notice that it didn't wait for me to type something in. Okay, and that's because of a quirk in the way the scanner works. Let me put this one first. It makes it a little bit easier. Scanner can be kind of tricky to use. Let me put this one first. It'll just be easier to see what's going on. Okay, so what did I forget? Oh. Yeah. Notice you make lots of little mistakes when you're put. See, I forgot to change that line to that to word. I'm reading in a line, so I print the line. I was printing word. Now, when I moved that code from down here to up here, the variable word is until down here. So then it worked when it was down here because the word had already been, that variable already existed. But when I took that code and moved it up here, then that misprint showed up. Yeah, there was a misprint there, but it didn't show up until I moved the code up here. Okay, now run this. Okay, what is your line of text? Okay, I can just type a whole bunch of stuff, hit enter, and it read, this is a whole line. Now the integer, now the decimal, and now if I type, notice if I type a whole lot, it's only going to read the first word. When I say next will only grab the very first word. Oops. Over here, when I hit enter, see, it only read the next word. Yeah, notice that this is next line, reads the whole line. Next int reads an integer. Next double reads only read the next double. Then next, really, I don't know why they didn't say next word. They just said next. Okay, so that reads one word. It reads up to a space. So it reads. Let's run it again. Text, integer, decimal. Okay, now what do they mean by type of word? Okay, notice I'm mixing up, but I haven't typed any spaces yet. Now I put a space, and here's some more stuff. Okay. See, it read all, it just kept reading until it found a space, and that's to it was a word. Okay, that was it. That was a word. Up. So when you say next, it means read up until a space. So scanner can read a whole line, an integer, a double, or one word. Okay. So that's how a program can get stuff from the outside world. Okay. Now there's another there's another thing that's a little bit messy about this. Okay. Excuse me. Drink something. If I run this one, okay, there's a line of text, an integer, a double. Now it's asking for a word. Notice I typed the integer 123, and it said your word is 123. This is not an integer. It's the string quote 123 close quote. Okay. When my code got down to here and I read the type a word and it read next, I typed 123, and right now word holds the string quote 123 close quote. That's not an integer. And we're going to see as we go along, there's a big difference in Java between a string like 123 and an integer 123. You can't tell them when you print them out. If I go back, I'm going to go over here to the visualizer. Okay. And I'm going to, okay, that's the number 12. That's the string quote 1, 2 close quote. If I visualize the execution of this and run it. See how the output doesn't look any different? But they're very different things. That's a number, that's a string. Now let me go back. What's 12 plus 1? What do you think it'll print? What do you think this guy's going to print? 12 plus 1 is
13.
Yeah, no. But what about 12 plus 1?
It'll do 121.
Yeah, I'll do 121 because that 12 is not a number, it's a string, and it's going to convert the 1 to quote 1 quote, and it'll end up producing 121. It's actually going to produce the string 121. But the string 121, when you print it out, will just look like the number 121. And this can get really confusing. If you're not paying attention to your code, you could get, see, you can get outputs that are, you can confuse yourself. Okay. When you look at the output, you can't tell the difference between something that is a number and something that is a string. That was actually the string 121, but it looks like the number 121. This output is the number 13 because we took 12 plus 1. Okay. When you're reading things, if you don't use next int and you use next, next int will read in a number, but next will read in a string. But if the string is 1, 2, 3, it's not somehow magically turned into a number. Okay. So next cannot read numbers. Even if you give it a number, it'll still take that 1, 2, 3 and turn it into the string 1, 2, 3. Okay. So it's like the opposite of print. When you print that string, you can't tell that the output was a string. You can the output just shows up like this. Same thing when you read. If you ask to read the next word, and the next word is 1, 2, that doesn't magically become the number 12. If you want to read a number, you have to use either next int or next double. Okay, it's like, so if I run this, that's not a double. That's still just a string. That's an integer. That's a double. And now here, that's not a double. That really was a string because I used next, not next double. So even though it looked like I typed a number and it looked like it printed a number, it wasn't. It was still a string. And this is another thing that trips people up, that because of the way things are printed out, that one was really not a number, it was a string, but it sure looks like a number here. And I typed in what looked like a number, and it got printed out looking like a number. So you can get fooled into thinking that you read a number here, but you didn't read a number. Okay, you read in a string. Okay, and so no, and you can see that it read in a string. If I do something like this, suppose I think I'm going to read an int, and I say, okay, I'm going to type in this won't even compile. See, next doesn't return an int. Next gives you back a string. So this is a mismatch here. So this won't compile. Okay. String cannot be converted to int. This guy gives you a string because it's asking for the next word. It gives you a string. You can't put a string in an int. Even if you think I'm going to type 1, 2, 3, so there's okay, Java won't agree to that. This thing reads strings. Doesn't matter if you plan on typing an int or you ask for an int, you can't store it in an int because there's nothing to force this thing to be an int. If you think you're going to type an int, it doesn't say that. So somebody could still type hello or cat or dog. So even though you say type in an integer and you ask for next, if you just ask for next, you're not getting an int, you're getting a string. Okay, so you have to have these things match up. So this has to be string, say word. I'm just calling it word. I can call it anything I want. Okay, so next returns a string. Next line also returns a string, but it reads everything the user types in. This only reads the first word of what they type in. Next int gives you an int, so you have to store it in an integer variable. And next double gives you a double, so you have to store it in a double variable. Okay. Okay, so using the scanner, your program can get data from what looks like the outside world. It's coming from the keyboard. The data into the program is coming from what somebody types in this case. So every time I run this program, the program can see different data coming in. Okay. Every time I run the program sees something different coming in. Okay. 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 So now we have both input and output. Okay. Now remember, the scanner has 4 ways of scanning: a whole line, an int, a double, and a single word. Now, let me take this code and put it over in the Java visualizer. Suppose I want to run this in the Java visualizer. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm running it in their system. Let's try running it in the Java visualizer system. And it turns out to be the Java visualizer is a little bit funny about this. And then we'll put this in, and the other thing I can do is I can put this in Dr. Java. Okay, so let me also go put this in Dr. Java. I want to see how these different systems work. So there's the books system, there's the Java visualizer, and there's also, it's coming, Dr. Java. So let's run it 3 ways. Okay, all right. Now, if I'm going to do it in Dr. Java, I need to, if I'm going to do it in Dr. Java, I need to paste my code in there and then save it. Dr. Java, I'm going to save it on my desktop. Okay, I'm going to save it on my desktop. Okay, so there I saved it. Then I have to compile it myself. Now, when I run it, the question is, well, how's Dr. Java going to show me this? So let's try running it. Okay, notice that Dr. Java draws a little box when it wants input. Okay, so there's type a line of text, and it gives you a little box. Okay, and you hit enter. Okay, the text you typed is, this is my text. Type an integer. Now you get this little box to show you that Dr. Java is waiting for you to type something. So I'll type in my integer. Okay, now it's waiting for a decimal number. Now it's waiting for another. Oh, I should go back and fix this. It's not asking for an integer, it's asking for a word now. Okay, so I'm going to type 2 words, and it only read the first one. Okay, and I should fix this, type a word. Okay, so we changed it from int to word. So you're okay. Now, so when you run this in Dr. Java, the scanner shows up as these boxes. See, this box is where you type your input. This box is where you type your input. So every time you call the scanner with a next, either next line, notice it's the same box. If it's next line, next int, next double, or next, it shows the same kind of box. Okay, so scanner shows you little boxes. Okay, if we go back over here, okay, in the book system, when you run it, it just shows you a little blinking cursor. We call that a cursor. So your input goes at the little blinking cursor. Okay. Okay, say a word, read one word. Okay, now what about the Java visualizer? The Java visualizer is kind of weird. Okay, let me copy my code again. See, there's my code. The Java visualizer cannot read from your keyboard. Okay, it's got a limitation. It can't read from your keyboard. So what it does is you click here on standard in. So you click that little box, and then you type in here what will be the input for these things here. So one line. So here's that input's going to go into this line here. Then I give it, say, my integer. And then a double. And then now when I run the program, when the program runs, it'll use this as what supposedly is being typed in. So the typing has to happen before you run the program. You have this little box and you type in your input there. You click visualize. Here's where the scanner is going to get its stuff from. Okay. So when I step through my code, the output's going to appear down here. Okay. Type a line of text. But now next line is going to go over here and read from over here. Now notice how line, read, that guy. Okay, so you see that that text got copied into the line variable. Okay, and then it gets printed out. Okay, and then it's going to read a integer. Okay, so now I'm going to create the variable num1. See, there's the variable num1, and it read its number from the second line of input. Okay, and then it's going to print out something. Okay, now notice that these things, since there was nothing typed over here, there was nothing that break up this input. See, there was the type of line of text. The line of text came from over here. So then when it printed out your text it all appeared on the same line. In the over here, remember we would type an enter. When we ran this program, type a line of text. 1, 2, 3. Now see, I hit enter. That's actually what put it on the next line. So the output appeared below the input. But over here in the visualizer, since the visualizer is doing this kind of weirdly, it says type a line of text. That's the output down here. But then it goes over here to get the input. So there's no me hitting the return key. So then when it prints out more output, it's just still on the same line. Okay. All right. So it ends up being kind of a little bit messy in this case. And then if I go, so I just step through here and I don't type anything. The input's coming from here. But the program is really getting its input from outside of the program. Because if I go back over here and start over again, I can change what's the input for the program. So I can go over here and I can change. Okay. See, the program will get its data from outside the program. So the program is still using the scanner to get data from outside of the program. It's just that the data has to be in this box. Okay. Then if I go down over to here, real quick, if I step through the program, I see my variables. I see where the program is going to be getting its input from, and I see the output over here. Okay. So the program's variables, where the program is getting its data from, and the output the program produces. So this is what it looks like in the Java visualizer. So we can run code in their system on their web page. We can run it in the visualizer, or we can run it in Dr. Java. They're all three a little bit different. It's the same program. Notice it's the exact same program running in three different places, and we'll get used to these slightly different ways of doing things. This book's built-in system, the visualizer system, and the Dr. Java system. Each one has its advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so if we're out of time, okay, so now we've got programs that can, the thing is, now we've got programs that can get their data from the outside world. Okay, now there's more in this chapter. What we've talked about is kind of scattered through this chapter. We did everything in this one example. So we did everything up here, but what we talked about were ideas that are scattered through this chapter, but we did it all in this one example. Okay, and we did it, like I say, in the visualizer, we did it in their system, we did it in the Java visualizer system, and also in Dr. Java. And you can, I'll make this code, and I'll put it up on the course website if you want to play around with it some more. And definitely play around with the code and play with it and just see how it works. Okay, so remember, there should be a homework assignment. Read this stuff for next week and practice these homework assignments here. Okay, do this practice stuff here. This is the practice stuff on what we've been talking about. It's not practice on you're going to be reading about next week. It's what we did this last week. So, but practice these problems and do the reading for next week. And look for the homework assignment to be up there like later today or tomorrow. Okay. Anybody got a last second question? Any last questions about what we talked about today or anything else? Okay. All right. So then I'll quit. I'll stop the sharing and quit. And if you have questions, send me email or come to office hours this afternoon. And we'll meet again on Tuesday. Have a nice weekend. Okay. Bye-bye.